So, dear participants, dear representative of national statistical offices and dear colleagues, so I think we will start. In any case, I can say a few words. In the meantime, other colleagues and partners can join. But yeah, it's already 2:05. So yeah, for the sake of time, I think we can initiate the session. Um, Dear partners and colleagues, thank you so much for joining this regional virtual clinics on SDG 16 indicators reporting. This is the session for the Arab states. I'm extremely happy to be here with you. As some of you know, I'm Filippo Di Carpegna. I work for the governance and peace building team at UNDP Regional Hub for Arab States that is based in Amman, Jordan. This session is co-organized with the Global Policy Center in Oslo, and I thank them for putting this together and for all the presentation information they will share today. Before I start, just a few basic housekeeping rules, the usual. I think we are all well acquainted to these online meetings, but just a couple of points. First, if you need a translation because the session will be in English, you have to go down on your screen. There is a globe icon. You can click on the icon and you will find the translation in Arabic. Also, as usual, please keep your microphone shut. You can obviously post your question in the chat or in the question and answer session, or you can raise your hand whenever you want. Last point, since we don't really have a time to do a round of introduction, take a couple of minutes just to put your name and title in the chat so that everybody is aware of who's attending this session. But it's mostly representative of national statistical offices from this region and colleagues from the governance and rule of law working at the UNDP country offices. So again, welcome to this session. As you probably know, this initiative is part of the broader efforts to support SDG monitoring, where accurate, timely, and reliable data are essential. UNDP has been working closely with national entities around the world to strengthen governance systems, supporting the collection, analysis, and use of governance statistics to inform evidence-based decision-making. Reliable data enable us to assess the effectiveness and accessibility of public institutions such as court, police, schools, and hospitals, and to ensure that everyone has equal opportunities and rights. Currently, we have around 55% of countries globally that have data on SDG 16. The percentage for this region is around 45%. So it's slightly below the global average, but we have to acknowledge that significant progress have been made since the start of the SDG agenda, considering that there were probably almost no data available. So we really have to thank all the national statistical offices for all the efforts they've been doing for many years now to reach this stage. The statistics we produce have the power to guide us towards our common goals, informing governments, civil society organizations, academia, and all interested parties. Additionally, they help track our global commitments as well as regional and national commitments related to the Sustainable Development Goals. In the context of SDG 16, UNDP is supporting the collection of statistics on access to dispute resolution mechanism, satisfaction with public services, representative and participatory design making in public service and the judiciary, and responsive and inclusive decision making. This collection of data has three main objectives. First, to inform the 2026 Global Progress Report on SDG 16, but also to inform the annual SDG 16 Global Progress Report. And lastly, to update the SDG indicator database where all data are featured and accessible to all users. We see that there is considerable data production at the national level, where the main purpose obviously is to produce data to respond to national strategies, priorities, and needs, which is as it should be. Also, we're collecting data for global monitoring. Our main objective is to support data producers and users in producing statistics that adhere to the highest possible standards and respond to their needs. In that sense, today's session will feature a short presentation on the SDG 16 indicators that UNDP is custodian for, and we welcome all questions you may have regarding the indicators, the process, or more general topics. We are also eager to hear any recommendation for improvement regarding the reporting process and indicators that you might have. This is UNDP's fifth global request for data, and we've been working to improve with each iteration. For instance, during the previous years, we conducted global clinics, but this year we decided to have regional clinics to better address specific regional needs and provide a more contextualized presentation. We have produced manuals for each indicator and are continually improving the reporting platform, but there may still be room for enhancement. We also wish to assist in data production, so please do not hesitate to contact the UNDP Global Policy Center for Governance and the Regional Hub if we can help. We hope this clinic is just the beginning of our collaboration with many of you, and we remain committed to working with you to improve governance statistics at national, regional, and global level. So thank you so much. This was the very brief introduction I wanted to do. So I will now hand over to the colleagues from the Oslo Center. Alexandra, I think it's you coming in. Yep.
Thank
Over
you
to
so
you.
much. Thank you, Filippo, for the very helpful context to this fifth global request for data. And thank you, colleagues, for joining us this afternoon. I'm just going to briefly go over the agenda. My name is Alexandra Wild. I'm the team lead for governance data and analytics here in Oslo at UNDP's Global Policy Center for Governance. So we've just heard from Filippo kicking us off with some very important information about why we are all here today and what we're going to speak about. And then I'll provide a very brief overview on the data collection process. And then my colleagues, Mariana Neves and Fatma Usheva, will take us through the specific indicators. And then we'll have time at the end for some interaction and some Q&A. But again, please do put any questions and comments in the chat. So these are the indicators under UNDP custodianship, separated into administrative records on the one side and household surveys on the other. There are 5 indicators that we're going to be speaking about. 16.7.1b on inclusive representation in the public service, 16.7.1c on inclusive representation in the judiciary. And then in terms of the survey-based indicators, we have 3. We've got 16.3.3 on access to dispute resolution mechanisms. And that's an indicator that we have a co-custodianship with the OECD and UNODC. And then we have indicator 16.6.2 on satisfaction with public services. And then lastly, indicator 16.7.2 on inclusive and responsive decision making. Now, as Filippo has said, these indicators reflect UNDP's mandate and our practical role in supporting countries on governance and justice. Here's some really important, very basic information for you to keep in mind. So many of you have received the request for data, which went out on the 19th of November. The deadline is just coming up. It's on the 31st of January. And the data is submitted through the SDG 16 data reporting platform that UNDP has set up and maintained. And that's where you can share any sort of questions or issues you may have had already in encountering or working or interacting with the data reporting platform. We are looking for any data between 2015 and 2026. And the data, the request goes to, and the data is uploaded through the designated national SDG focal points. And these are focal points that each country has submitted as a focal point to the UN Statistics Division. And also UNDP country officers have access to the reporting platform. Now here you can see very simply the data flow. So we have the data producers or data providers on the left hand there, and then the SDG focal point, often the NSO, will quality sure the data that comes in, and then that is submitted to the reporting platform. And we'll take a peek at the reporting platform in a second. And then that reporting platform is maintained by us, UNDP, the custodian agency. We will work with the focal points on any issues with the data and work closely with you. And then once that's all fine, then it's and then that's gets sent over to the UN Statistics Division, the Global Indicator Database. So NSOs may not always be the main data provider for these indicators, especially the ones that are measured by administrative records, but still play a very important role in liaising with the relevant data institutions. And we'll hear more about that from my colleagues Mariana and Fatma. Now, our main priority is to collect as much data as possible and to work with you to provide data for the indicators that are aligned with the official metadata. Now, that's really important, that alignment. Without it, we don't have comparability. So the alignment with the metadata is key. We do prioritize official statistics and statistics from the national statistical system, but there might be data produced and published in partnership with national institutions. The data from other producers, this point number 3 on the slide, are considered only when no data is produced by or in collaboration with the national statistical system. So for those that have been on the platform, you may see that there are sources there that are outside of the national statistical system, and that some of those indicators are pre-filled with that kind of data. And it may come from the Labour Force Survey, the World Values Survey. So there are some sources there. Have a look and let us know if that data is okay, or if you have updated data or alternative national data to what we have there for those possible external data sources. So just get in touch with us. Now, what is the data used for? Obviously, to measure and monitor progress. It's also used for global, regional, and national analyses of trends. You can see there some of the reports that are based on the data, the Global Progress Report on SDG 16. It's also used for better understanding emerging risks and vulnerabilities, for resource allocation in terms of where there are key deficits or gaps, for advocacy and awareness raising, and of course for evidence-based policy formulation for national strategies. So here is what the platform looks like, the SDG 16 data reporting platform. You can see the different indicators there on the left. You just click on it, it will take you into each of the different indicators. And then, we won't look at that right now. We will, you can let us know in the comments or in the Q&A if there are particular issues. It's quite an intuitive platform, but if you have any challenges there in navigating around it or understanding what's there, do reach out to us. But it's a fairly straightforward platform. So with that, we will now move into a more focused consideration of the SDG 16 indicators under UNDP co-custodianship. Great. Over to you, Mariana.
Thank you so much, Alex. So colleagues, we'll go through the indicators Alex already mentioned, and it will help to clarify some questions that the National Statistics Office colleagues might have, but also for the UNDP colleagues to understand how the reporting process goes, as you are the main focal point in the country. It will be really good for you to have a good understanding what we are asking your colleagues. So the first indicator is the indicator the UNDP and the CSHR are custodian, means they are responsible for it, for the indicator at the global level. It's a very new indicator. It only entered the framework, the SDG framework in 2020. And immediately after that, we had the COVID, which really was a constraint for, there's several constraints, but one of them was that it was not possible to go to the field and to collect. But this is still a very important indicator, and it came to try to fill a gap that we have on access to justice, because we had information on the criminal side, but not on the civil side. And it also helps us understand the constraints that the population has in accessing what is the unmet need. Next. So the way the indicator operates, or what it's actually collecting, what is that? It's collecting the experience of a dispute in the last 2 years. As Alex said, it's a survey-based indicator. And the 2 years time frame is so just to have long enough. Thankfully, disputes is a rare event and should be a rare event. So we have a longer frame to allow us to pick and to find these cases. And what is considered a dispute, the indicators grouping them in what you see on your right side. I'll go there in a minute. And the way it functions when you're doing the service, that you will ask disputes, then you have a lot of follow-up questions regarding one of the disputes, and that will allow us to have a little bit better understanding of the mechanisms that are being accessed, why the people are not accessing, which is also very, very crucial information, because the reasons can be very, very diverse. Next, please. So, the legal systems are not the same. They're quite diverse, but we need certain harmonization across countries for us to understand. So this indicator, what it collects about those types of dispute that you see on the screen, the 10 types of disputes. If in the case of the country, what happens sometimes that you don't have a perfectly aligned, so this is the helps to align with one of them. In some cases, you might have an additional dispute. So in that case, your questionnaire might need some adjustment. The other side is what is the mechanism that the population is accessing after experiencing a dispute, and we have all of those. And here is a place as well that the countries are free to adjust to what mechanism is relevant to them. So we make it more actionable at the national level and to better respond to what your policymakers need. Next, please. And the way that this indicator is going to collect the information is that you have the number of persons who experienced a dispute during the past 2 years who access the formal and informal dispute resolution. And this is divided by the number of those who experienced a dispute in the past 2 years. This indicator excludes all of those who have experienced a dispute but did not need dispute resolution mechanism, because it is possible because the person has the sufficient resources for several reasons that it did actually don't require the dispute resolution mechanism. So the indicator excludes them. And what we have at this moment in 2025, the countries that have data is the one that you see there, and we have a high access on the 2 countries of the region with the state of Palestine and Tunisia. These are countries also that were quite involved in creating this indicator and validating, testing this indicator before the global standards were fully established. The next indicator was 1662, when satisfaction of public service, also a survey-based indicator. Next. All of the indicators are special. This one is special because it also fills a very, very important gap, which is it allows to understand how the services are performing, but in a way that meets the population. So it's going beyond what we used to measure, which was more infrastructure when we're trying to measure effectiveness of service delivery, or we measured capacity. So here we actually moving a little bit away from that, and it has several because it has several uses. It can be used for performance evaluation, resource allocation, to also to complementing other indicators to try to see the public trust in institutions. In this indicator, it makes sense to have it very regular because it allows you to also go see throughout the time how the population is perceiving the efficiency. And here, as I said, it's a people center. This is focused in the last 2 years. It is some targeted services, and it is allows governments to assess what they're called to assess their customer service. Next. Now, when we talk about satisfaction of public services or effectiveness of service delivery, each one of us in this call, and this will happen as well with the respondents when they're faced with the survey, with national statistics, there's a lot that we can call or can contemplate when they're discussing what we name good quality. But so for the survey, it has the 7 that you see now in your screen. It considers accessibility, affordability, quality of facilities, equal treatment, effectiveness, delivery of service, timeliness, and treatment by staff. All of these are then, if you want to see the questionnaire, there is a more detail how all these questions are actually posed in the survey. And for the global indicator, we consider especially 3 types of service: the healthcare, the education, government service that you see now in your screen. The reason for focusing on only on those 3 is because we need services that have a broad contract with population, because if it's a service has very little contact, then we cannot catch in the questionnaire. And another is it should be services that are comparable across countries as well. But this does not mean that in the given country you cannot do the same for other services. And we already have some cases that countries are doing for other services. The only constraint is, this is extremely important to measure for national purpose, but we will not be able to report it for the global database, which is not the main purpose, of course. The main purpose is to support decision making at the national level. And that indicator, with the positive responses to it, creates all of this very rich, broad range of indicators that allows us to understand how this indicator is performing, according with the attribute, but also with their overall satisfaction of this. And the platform will accept this information, very detailed information, including on the segregation that you see now on your left side, if the female, male, urban, rural, and several other information. So the more information you have, if you have in one attribute, please provide information. That's always helpful to have a little bit more knowledge on what's happening. Now, how we perform here for this indicator, we have a little bit more or a lot more information than we had for the previous on 1633. So if you consider overall satisfaction, we see that we are globally a little bit more satisfied, a little more people satisfied with primary education, maybe a little bit less with health service, only 56.8. And we see the different levels of satisfaction. Now here only healthcare, because we don't have that much cover for the other 2. Ranging with a very high 74 or relatively high 74.2 for Eastern Asia, South Asia, and the lower in the LAC region, Latin American, Caribbean, and we see Western North Asia at 62.7. And the fact that we have a lot of information regarding this indicator also allow us to have a better understanding of how it's performing globally and what are the differences between several regions. Next. And we can also zoom in a specific region and see how this satisfaction is. And the more information, if you have it at more granular level, at sub-regional level, that will give even richer information of the performance of the indicator. So the last survey-based indicator is on 1672, and this is the responsive and inclusive decision making. It's a very special indicator for several reasons, but one of them is because it measures the relationship of the population or how they perceive the decision making. So it is a proxy indicator for our ability to participate in society. And it also is a very important indicator to complement the indicators that Fatima will present after me, which is more on the human resources side. Both of them extremely important, but they complement each other in a way. So this is the simplest, I think, one of the simplest indicators in terms of how many questions it requires to collect. It is only two sides. In one side, it measures the inclusive decision making. So what you see is actually the actual question: how much would you say that the political system in your country allows people like you to have a say in what the government does? On the other side of this indicator is also is this the population responding? Is asking on the responsiveness on decision making, and is how much will you say that political system in the country that you are allows people like you to have an influence in politics. And these two indicators end up being very powerful indicators. They have very different data availability at this moment at the global level. They focus back, please. The indicator focuses also on the positive side, so people that agree with the statement or they think that they have an influence or they have a say. Next. And this is also inserted in the platform. Sometimes you might only have inclusiveness or responsiveness. Please fill the NSO is encouraged to fill one or the other, but ideally both. Next. And our data availability, our world is now at 44.1, and we have a great variety, like all indicators. And here we have the Northern America and Europe with the lowest with the 29.5, and Central Asia, South Asia with the 70. And we have this Western Asia, as you saw. And we see here now with the global level, like the 1662, the fact that we have more country levels have a better understanding what's happening at the global level. And next, if we go to the specific region, we can also see the variety that we have inside the region. Now, one thing, as we were saying, there is the lack of data in some cases for several reasons. One of the reasons was the inexistence of standards. So UNDP, the COSHR a few years ago started to create standards to help guide countries that are collecting this indicator, but also other indicators. Next, please. And they created the SDG 16 survey. We created the SDG 16 survey that collects information on the indicators you already mentioned. That's on the access to justice and what we have on the governments, but it also collects information or can collect information on bribery, on experience of discrimination, and the several violence indicators that you see in your screen now. So the physical violence, sexual violence, safety, sexual and non-sexual harassment, all very important indicated in the SDG framework. And the way the instruments are being used, in some cases your country have a very acute need for SDG 16 data. Maybe you're preparing a VNR or your national development plan, or there's another reason. So there's a full implementation. You go to the field with the entire survey, you try to collect. In some cases, you already have a survey and you need information in one specific, for instance, on bribery, on discrimination, on satisfaction. So you can take the model that you require and host it in another, or bring it to another ongoing. So for instance, you're already doing a labor force survey and you have a little bit of space, they can use that option. In some cases, some countries, including some countries in the region, they already have some governance survey, but you need to align to the global standards. So in that case, the survey is more of a guidance to allow you to align with the existing global standards. Thank you so much. Those are the survey-based indicators, the 3 survey-based indicators. And now I pass to Fatima to the 1 or 3 admin record indicators. Fatima.
Thank you very much, Mariana, for walking us through these survey-based indicators. And unfortunately, we see that we still have significant data gaps. And I'm sure that many colleagues, both at the NSO and country offices, will immediately flag the challenges in implementing nationally representative population surveys and implementing those and the time and effort it takes. But these are indicators really that cannot be measured through any other means. So I'm going to focus now actually on other two indicators. I mean, it's a one indicator with three sub-indicators, and we're going to get a glimpse of the differences when they come from administrative records. So we have indicator 1671, as we like to call them and work with numbers, that is focused on representation in public institutions. At both, we would like to ideally look at national level, but also subnational level. And as you're going to see in a second, we also would like to, of course, capture the various decision-making positions that these various population groups we find in our population and how they're represented in these institutions and the various decision-making positions they occupy. So this indicator has three sub-indicators. One looks at legislatures, which is members of parliament overall, but there is also other statistics that is collected as part of the legislatures component, but that is under the custodianship of the Interparliamentary Union. It's another organization dealing with this indicator, so we're not going to be talking about it in the next few minutes. We're going to focus on representation in public service and representation in the judiciary, which are entirely under the responsibility of UNDP. So starting just as a very broad framing, and I'm sure that I don't need to go into details or any convincing mode for you to be convinced of why representation matters and why is this indicator so important. But from the one hand, this indicator really can tell us something about, of course, a descriptive representation. The number of men and women that are working in public institutions or the judiciary, or the number of people with immigrant background, or the number of people by different age groups that are working in public institutions and the judiciary. So this descriptive representation, of course, it is a matter of fairness and equality. But on the other hand, this indicator also tells us something about what we call substantive representation. It tells us whether these various groups hold decision-making positions in our public institutions, and they're able to shape the political agenda and public life. And so, of course, we're not only aiming to reach descriptive representation, that the society we live in and the diversity of society we live in is very much reflected and represented in our public institutions, but also those various groups hold decision-making positions. We've seen from a lot of research, of course, that when public institutions are representative, people perceive those institutions to have greater legitimacy, and it all links back to the trust in institutions. So people also have higher trust in our public institutions when they're better represented by various population groups. Now, when it comes to representation in public service, we're looking, of course, into numbers of men and women, or by age, or persons with disabilities, or other national relevant groups in total. So we look at these disaggregations at the national level and at the subnational level as well, if data are available, but that's our main indicator. However, if data are available, we also very much encourage the submission of data based on what I mentioned as decision-making level. What is the number of men and women, or the number of people by age groups or by disability status that occupy senior government official positions, or managing directors, and all the way down to general and keyboard clerks. So we are collecting that type of data as well, which very much tells us whether representation is also substantive and not only descriptive. And finally, we also collect data and encourage the submission of data focused on 4 sectors. which are the police, education, health, and front desk administrative personnel, which is basically those that issue IDs and passports and licenses, because those are sectors where public servants have very frequent direct interaction with the public. So we can basically see sectors that often interact with the public service, what is their representation? And those 4 sectors also account for really a substantial portion of public service jobs. On the platform, this data and we understand that this data could actually be hosted by different ministries, or depending on how the country is organized, it could be also very well centralized, and only one body holds all the information coming from the various ministries and public service. But on the platform, the nationally designated focal point can insert these raw numbers. And you can see here an example. We have the men and women and the total, but also by decision-making position and the various sectors. The 4 sectors I mentioned. Something very important to highlight here is that the system is designed, the platform is designed in a very flexible way. So if you, for example, don't have information disaggregated by decision-making position, you can still submit data on the total, or vice versa. Suppose you don't have information on the total, then you can still submit information on some of the number of employees based on decision-making level, or only for a certain sector. Now, something I would like to really underline here is that once you submit the raw data, meaning the numbers here, if that doesn't represent the public service overall, but it only represents certain ministries, there is a whole page with metadata where you can go and insert the details of what exactly your data captures. And that's extremely important for us, because then we can, once we produce analytical products, but also once we submit the data for global monitoring of these SDG indicators, we ensure that this is actually a comparable data that can be compared with other countries, not only over time within the country, but also with other countries. Now, just a few frequently asked questions when it comes to representation in public service. We already mentioned what institutional units are included, is oftentimes asked. So clearly, this is only ministries, agencies, departments, nonprofit institutions that are controlled by the public authorities. And here it is very important to stress that, of course, the appointed elected officials are excluded, military is excluded, together with public corporations and quasi-corporations owned or controlled by government units. So we're only looking at, of course, units controlled by public authorities. Now, the other important question we often get asked is what administrative levels are included. And this indicator calls for the collection of data at the national and state, subnational, whatever subnational means to you. It could be state or any other subcentral level government. And it does not ask for the inclusion of local government units. But of course, if your administrative system allows you to pull the data also at the local level, please feel free to report it to us. That is really fantastic. We have also included on the platform the different occupational categories or the association with the ISCO 08 code for your own reporting purposes and comparison purposes. But we understand that you could also have your national classifications of these occupational categories. So we have provisioned a space for you where you can go and report your national classification. So we know what's exactly included in senior government official positions or any other position. Now, something, again, very important to mention here for this indicator, and it's very similar for the judiciary indicator, representation in the judiciary, is that when we report the indicator, it's not just simply the share of women in public service, or the share of women in the judiciary, or the share of people under the age of 35 in public service. But we go one step further, and we take into account what is the share of that group in the population. And I'm going to give you an example here. You can see 3 examples, actually, that when it comes to women, representation of women in public service, we take the share of women in public service and we divide that by the share of women in the working age population. So we account for how large that group is in the working age population. Similar for the indicator on youth representation, we take proportion of people that are the age 35, less than 35 years old. That's how we define youth for this indicator. And we divide that by the share of youth in the working age population. That results in an indicator that is usually 1 means complete representation, so perfect representation of that group in public service. Below 1 means underrepresentation, and above 1 is overrepresentation. I mentioned that when we compute this indicator, we divide the indicator by the share of that population group that is found in the working age population. And something important to stress is that that share for women is fixed at 50%, and that has been a decision made for this indicator when it was set up. So that is fixed at 50%, and you see that on the platform fixed at 50%, whereas all the other denominators, of course, should be inserted by you. And I would like to stress that if the denominator is not provided, so if we don't know what is the share of persons with disabilities in the population, although we know how many persons with disability work in public service, we are not able to compute this indicator. So just wanted to stress this out. In terms of data, we have quite a good data coverage on representation of women in public service. Currently, we have data from 156 countries across the world, and you can see here the data availability, although you can also spot immediately some pockets with data gaps, some geographical pockets with data gaps, which we're trying, of course, to work with all national statistical offices to address. In terms of the region, there are also some data gaps at the regional level when it comes to representation of women in public service. And something very important to stress as well here is that although, of course, a lot of countries use administrative records to report on these indicators, such as human resource management information systems, or pulled out of those systems, or Ministry of Gender that is compiling the information if such ministry exists. We also use, in some cases, labor force surveys because they allow us to estimate the overall representation of women in public service. So some of this actually that you see for your own region, it could come from a labor force survey as well.
Fatma?
No,
I'm sorry, just 1 second. Our interpreter asking if you could speak a little bit slower.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you. I tend to go a bit quick. Thank you. So now moving to a representation in the judiciary and the indicator that collects information on that, it is very similar to what we see with the indicator on representation in public service. But in this case, we look at the different courts. We collect information not only on the overall number of judges, but we also look at how many judges, men, women, by age, by disability status, are in the Supreme, Constitutional Courts, how many are in higher level courts and in lower level courts. And very similar to public service is we also would like to know something about decision making. And so we collect data on judges and registrars if such data are available that can tell us basically these various population groups, where are they, where they are over or underrepresented. Now, again, I'm not going to go or spend much time on this, but this is how the platform looks like, where you can insert the row numbers, so the number of judges and registrars by sex, by age, by disability, and by whatever population group you deem relevant to disaggregate by. And I'm going to give you an example. Some, for example, report data based on immigration status, other report data based on ethnicity, and so it's really up to the country. In a very similar manner, we don't report we don't just report a share of women judges or the share of youth judges or the share of judges with disability, but we take one step further and we divide these shares by the size of that group in the working age population. Again, just to underline, because we keep getting that question, the share of women in the working age population is fixed at 50% for all countries across the world. Now, we currently have data on 150 countries for women in the judiciary, and this is the first time we actually have such a comprehensive global database on the representation of women in the judiciary. And when it comes, of course, for the MENA region, we still have some data gaps in terms of data availability. Now, Alex mentioned in the very beginning of her presentation that some of these indicators could actually be, or the data for some of these indicators could actually be produced by other entities than the National Statistical Office. And the National Statistical Office is liaising with all those entities in order to collect and quality assure the data submitted to us. And for representation in the judiciary, this is an excellent example where we oftentimes see the data are available at Ministry of Justice or the various courts do collect and disseminate such data, but oftentimes it's not reported to the national statistical offices. So this is an area where we can still work together and bridge this gap in reporting of this indicator. Just some findings at the global and regional level. We do have some regions which have achieved representation, even slight over-representation of women in public service and the judiciary. That is North America and Europe and some countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. However, when we focused on Western Asia and Northern Africa, we see that we still have quite significant gaps to close in representation of women in those two areas of government. And with that, I'm going to end it here. And if you have any questions for any of these indicators or any comments or any suggestions, yeah, we look forward to hearing from you now. Thank you.